Hello and welcome to Dad Stories. Fathers are important, and this show exists to demonstrate the value of fatherhood by highlighting positive experiences with dads. No father is perfect, and not everyone has had the blessing of a good father figure in their lives. But all of us can benefit from some good stories about good dads. Today we talk to Luke Cargin, a husband, father, and minister from the great state of Iowa. Luke was kind enough to let me into his office so we could talk about family, dads, and the twists and turns of life. I hope you enjoy this talk. The episode has been a long time in coming, but the conversation is well worth it. So Luke, tell us about your dad.
Well, my dad's Rich Cargin. He is or has been a contractor, carpenter, worked in that kind of a trade most of my life. For a while, he was not. He was working for other people. He did some insulating of houses and weatherproofing of houses for a place called Mid-Sioux Opportunity. He did that for a couple years, and then the rest of my life, he's been a contractor that went out and built things and fixed things to put food on the table. One of the things that allowed, I think, me to maybe have a different relationship with my dad than maybe some other folks is because of his work in construction. When I got done with the kind of high school age schooling, I came to a point where I didn't really know 100% for sure what I wanted to do with my life. So I just started working for him, and I did that for quite a few years, quite a few years of working every day in construction with my dad. I'd done, projects around the house, and we had worked together a lot of my childhood through various things. Hey, we're going to shingle the house this summer, or we're going to strip all the woodwork in the front entryway. My parents live in a Victorian like old house, so there I spent an entire summer with wood stripper, dental tools, and little brushes, just cleaning out this like intricate staircase of the old varnish and stuff. So through a lot of that, I guess I got to know my dad in a dad way, but also in like a coworker kind of a sort of a way. I think I think I got to see my dad in a lot of different scenarios. I got to see him in frustrating things aren't going right scenarios that I might not have seen as much as a small child. I also got to just kind of sometimes be the one, as we had done it longer, to be the one that had an answer and see how my dad would react when maybe I knew how to do something and he didn't have the greatest plan for it, as roles kind of switched and evolved as we got older.
How did he react to that?
Fairly well. Yeah. I think my dad has always been pretty open to allowing me and specifically me and my brother, because we were the two that were working in construction with him, to have ideas, to think for ourselves, to figure out what the best solution is. The kind of construction we were doing wasn't necessarily always straightforward. It was a lot of remodeling, and then when you're remodeling, you never know what you're going to find. You never know what you're going to dig into. So it was a lot of having to be really flexible. Of, oh, well, I thought we were going to do this, but today that's not going to be the plan because we found this mess. So yeah, I think that was good for me growing up, and I guess more as a young adult, to see that side of just solving problems with my dad. That was pretty cool. There were times where, yeah, with my own perspective, I was able to, maybe solve problems that we were struggling with when it came to, just the projects that we were working on. My experience with my dad and uh, the time I spent with him and have spent with him. I don't want to speak like he's dead or something, because my dad's very much so alive. But as a young child, when he was going taking a trip to the hardware store, or taking some stuff out to the landfill. I remember, going on some of those trips too, and just how that was always kind of a highlight.
What made that a highlight for you?
I don't even know. Like, there's nothing specific about it. Just I specifically remember walking into the hardware store as a little kid with my dad, and for whatever reason, that's a memory that sticks in my mind. You know what I mean? Just hanging out with dad. We're driving around the truck, going to the landfill to dump stuff. That's really boring, right? Well, it's a reminder for me actually, because I forget this with my own kids, to like take them places. Just the two of us, just me and one of the kids, because so oftentimes I can be in a hurry just to I'm gonna get something done, or if I take the kid, then I gotta make sure they get buckled in, or you know, this is gonna take longer, or I wanna be on my schedule. So when I think about how my dad took me, and he didn't take me everywhere every time, you know what I mean? It's just those are memories that stick out in my mind. It's a reminder that man, I need to be trying to do those kinds of things with my own kids.
Do you think he was intentional about it, or do you think that was just life?
Yes. Yes, I think it was intentional, but I think also it was life. Um, my growing up, we lived on an acreage until I was about 6 years old, and at that point we moved to town to Lamar's, and my parents had bought a house that was, like I said earlier, it was an old Victorian house that needed a lot of improvements. They lived on this acreage, saved up some money, bought this house, and they were gonna fix up this old house. And right about that same time that we were moving into town, my younger brother was born, who has cerebral palsy. So he was born 3 months early. So that kind of put a different level of like responsibility and challenge for both of my parents, for my mom and my dad, to where my dad had at that point two sons that could run around and play, and then one son that had to be carried everywhere or in a wheelchair. Um, so out of some necessity of whether my mom needed it or me or we need to go somewhere, like sometimes you just had to take a couple of us with him because that's the way life was. Uh, yeah, so
How did he adapt to that?
I don't know if it was hard or if it was just the next thing he had to do. Does that make sense? One of the things that I've always noticed about my dad is that he'll just get it done. Like the challenges that he faces, like that, and maybe they are hard, and I didn't pick that up as a kid, but it was this is the next thing I need to do, and I'm going to do it. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, we drug my brother Tim everywhere we went. So um, when I was probably in high school, Tim was, I'd say I was probably, yeah, somewhere in high school. My brother, who's 3 years younger than me, Levi, was, also, a middle school or early high school, something like that. And our family went to Mount Rushmore. And at Mount Rushmore, there's this path that you can go down to the rubble pile at the bottom of the thing. There's a sign there that says 600 stairs. So, like, if you're gonna go down there, you need to know there's 600 stairs between here and there. So, um, between Levi and me and my dad, we were gonna take Tim down there. We were gonna carry that wheelchair down 600 stairs because we were gonna go down there and look at it. And I can testify there's at least 600 stairs down to that rubble pile at the bottom of Mount Rushmore. But that just kind of was how my dad approached how we were gonna be a family with a kid that had cerebral palsy, a kid that was a quadriplegic. So there's four of us. I don't want to leave out my sister Sarah. Sometimes she gets forgotten because she's 9 years younger than me and after Tim. So, but yeah, that was just kind of how my parents approached how we were going to be a family. That we were just going to take Tim wherever we could. Um, and that's just the way we're going to do it. My dad is very much so still a part of my life. He's very much so like he's a regular person who's flawed. You know what I mean? So like I want to talk about him, but at the same time, it's like he's not perfect. He's not like some saint or some dead person. He's a man like me and like you that has to make it through life. And has to try to make the right decisions. And sometimes we mess those up, and sometimes we don't. You know. So what is my dad? Um, what does it mean to be a man like in my dad's mindset, or maybe the better way to say it is how I would perceive my dad and his thought on what it means to be a man um, would be like service. The thing that I feel like he taught me throughout the years and demonstrated was that his role and my role would be to serve and provide, to serve others, to serve kids, a wife, an employer, and that was going to be like what it took to be a successful man. Is that you're going to go out there and take care of things and people. Uh, so I guess that's kind of is how I perceive my dad perceives manhood. I don't know if that's a great way to put it, but uh, yeah,
Why was it so important for you as a kid to have your dad be involved and be a part of your life?
it's hard to put a finger on why it was important to have my dad be part of my life. Like, it's not one of those things where I'm like, oh, well, A, B, C, D. This is why. Although, as I think about it now, kind of try to put myself in the best position of looking back, I think there was definitely security in um, knowing that I had a father who was gonna be there and who was not going anywhere, but also just this teacher. My dad had not planned to um, be a contractor. That he had gone to school to be a teacher, and he's a history buff. He'd gone to school to be a history teacher, and he made a mistake in that he didn't get his coaching endorsement when he got out of school. And at the time that he finished college, they're just if you didn't have a teach, if you weren't a coach, it was gonna be hard to get a job. So he ended up working in construction and just kind of continued that. And then he had kids and had to put food on the table, that kind of thing. But I always felt like he was trying to prepare me for something, trying to prepare us for the next thing. When we would, when he would show us how to change a tire or how to change the oil, he wouldn't do it all. He was very hands on, like get in there and figure it out. And I don't change the oil in my own car now. I pay someone else to do that. But my dad taught me how to do it. Um, and I think that has value that I got to be there and learn that, even if we got angry at each other from time to time, and even if I was like, I don't care, I don't want to learn how to do this. Um, he still made a point of trying to teach me how to do those things. And some things are traits that I've picked up to this day. Like one of the things that it's kind of this, maybe you could call it old school chivalry type of a thing, but when I remember we had some people we would take to church from time to time, or people we'd pick up. and give a ride. My dad never left the driveway or the side of the house until he saw that that person had gotten into the house or he'd take them into the house, little things like that where, and then I remember we talked about it like, hey, why am I doing this? I'm making sure that they don't fall in the ice or whatever. Um, and that's something that I found myself doing now too. Is like, hey, kids, when we're dropping off your friend at their house, we're sitting in the driveway until they get in the door. So some of those kinds of things are just really little things that I think build character and show a desire to think about another person over yourself. And I think that's one of the things that I picked up from my dad. And I hope that's a trait that I continue to show and live out like he did and has. Some of those other things along the lines of what we might call chivalry of, you know, opening doors for people. One of the things I learned, and part of it's from my dad, and part of it's from the house that I grew up in, um, of like paying attention to when someone has a disability and they might need your help, and to be willing to step in, like hold the door for somebody in a wheelchair or in with some kind of a physical limitation. Like my dad always did that. I don't know if he did that before my brother was born or not, um, but something that I kind of definitely learned um, from from him, and I hope to be continuing to do those things.
Let me take a second to tell you about a company I feel strongly about. We all have a responsibility to our family and our community to be ready to help should an emergency arise. We all want to be an asset, not a liability in a crisis situation. That's where Woodline Defense comes in. Woodline Defense is a firearms instruction company based out of Omaha, Nebraska, started by a former cop who is now a pastor and teacher. They specialize in training and equipping individuals for higher levels of competence with firearms, and have programs specifically designed to help churches set up and improve security teams. They have rifle and pistol instruction, from basic to advanced, along with a concealed carry class. They help folks feel comfortable, but they also push them to get better. You can find out more at woodlinedefense.com or reach out to them on Facebook. Woodline Defense. Training for those who have a heart to protect others.
But one of the things that I really appreciate about my dad is that I do think that he was purposeful about preparing me and my siblings for life. One of the things that he was always doing was trying to teach us something that we're going to face later in life and prepare us for that. Part of that is my dad was purposeful about preparing us, whether it's how to change the oil or how to drop someone off when you've given them a ride, just make sure they get in the door. To when I was probably 16, my dad took me to the bank and had me sit in while he met with the guy that handled his you know uh, mutual fund and Roth IRA type of stuff. And hey, meet my guy, and then we're gonna talk about how to invest some money, and you're gonna prepare for that now. And you're gonna start saving some money now. Uh, so whether it's financial or stuff around the house or some relational stuff. One of the things that my parents and I don't because I want to be more clear about this. Yes, my dad took me places. And yes, my dad involved me in I was at his I saw him at work. I saw him in uh, around the house. I saw him in his work environment. I saw him in leisure, fishing and hunting and all those kinds of Midwest father son things. Um, but my dad was not at every single baseball game I had. He was not at every single hockey game I had. Um, he was not he wasn't there every single time I ever did anything. Um, And I don't resent him for that, or I'm not mad about that. Um, there were probably a few things I would have been like, "Oh, I wish he could have made it to that, or not made it to that." It'd been cool if he'd have been there. Um, but as much as I felt like, you know, growing up, I did feel as though a huge, like, probably the main priority in my dad's life was taking care of his family. That being said, I had baseball games that my parents didn't necessarily make it to every single one, and that was okay. Um, and I think that's something that I look at some parents today that will have to make it to every single thing their kids ever do, and I think that's good. I think we need to be there and available, but we're not ruining our kids if we don't. Um, and I'm still struggling with that balances in my own life. Um, Typically, if my kids are in a sport, I end up being there. I remember watching this old movie, and I can't even think of the name right now, but it was this old, probably black and white movie, and it was this dad that had two sons that were like warriors. This is maybe a period film from the 13th century or something, and they had this thing as these two sons grew up that the the sons could do their own thing or question the dad when they could throw the dad in the well. And there was like this well in this black and white film. And I remember that my dad jokingly said, that me and my brother could do the same thing. We could talk back to him, or we could, you know, have our own kind of like you can make that own decision when you can throw me in the well. And in our house, the well was the couch. Like if we could get our dad and like throw him onto the couch or wrestle him onto the couch, that was uh, the thing. So I remember, I don't know how many times me and my brother at like 11 and 8 are you know all we can do to manhandle one arm of my dad. It's I don't think we might have thrown him on the couch when we were like 18 and 15, when he didn't stand a chance because we outweighed him at that point. But I don't think we ever really successfully threw him in the well. But that's always been one of those. Uh, you kind of put your dad on a pedestal sometimes, like they're superhuman. I remember, I remember the first time that I realized my dad was like not Superman, or not like that he was mortal. You know what I mean? We, uh, my Levi, my brother, and I had both just got new bikes. They were like BMX trick bikes, so they're 24-inch tires. They're a lot smaller base than a mountain bike. And once again, I was probably somewhere between 13 and 15. I don't really remember for sure. And so we brought home these BMX trick bikes, and my dad had made us this little ramp that we would jump our mountain bikes off of before, that was maybe 6 inches off the ground. And my dad went off the ramp with one of our trick bikes, which operate completely different than a mountain bike. So he pulled up on the front end and just crashed bad, because it was you can't jump off a ramp on a BMX bike like you do a mountain bike. It's a terrible idea. And he landed on the sidewalk and hit his head. And um seeing my dad like unconscious with like blood coming out of his ear, and uh and cut helpless, that was one of those like jarring moments as a young man, to be like, my dad is like mortal. Like, he's hurt. I'd never seen him hurt, you know what I mean? So to see him just like laying there semi unconscious, bleeding, and kind of moaning was a jarring experience. I remember running into the house and calling 911, and as a I must have been younger than 15. I must have been like 13 or something like that. But I never called 911 before, and I'm calling 911 going, I, I remember wanting to convince them that they needed to send an ambulance. Like, no, I want you to understand. Yes, I'm a kid, but this is serious. Like, we're gonna need help. Like, uh, and just like that, are you gonna send help? Like, I don't know if I'm doing this right, and I don't know if you're really gonna come. It ended up working out fine. One of the guys on the ambulance crew lived like a block away, so by the time I got back outside with the cordless phone, like he was coming across the street, so like there was help there right away. But my dad did have a nerve in the side of his head that was pinched um, as a result of that. So for about 3 to 6 months, something like that, he had to manually blink his eye because like the side of his face was like paralyzed isn't the right word, but looked like he had a stroke almost. So he had like a droopy lip, and he had to like manually blink his eye. So that was an experience of, oh, my dad is like human and mortal, and and maybe not Superman, which I think is good for anybody to like recognize in their own life.
How does that affect you with your own kids?
That's a great question. As I was thinking about this story of my dad not being Superman, it got me kind of thinking again, do I need to be more purposeful about showing my own kids some of my flaws in a safe way, obviously. Or do I need to be more purposeful about showing my own kids that like uh, I am mortal, that I have things that I struggle with and things that I not everything is easy or perfect for me, and that I don't just conquer every problem with no issue. And I don't know completely the answer to that, and what that looks like with my own kids, but it has had me wrestling with that of how do you how do you in a healthy, safe way, in an appropriate way, let your kids know that it's okay to not always be in control, to not always have all the answers, that life is going to sometimes throw you some curveballs that you're going to have to deal with, and they're going to be hard. And you might have to manually blink your eye with eye drops for a few months, or carry a wheelchair down 600 stairs at Mount Rushmore that you didn't plan to do, but that's okay because there's joy in the struggle. There's fulfillment in the hard things. Um, and that, I mean, realistically, all of the things in our lives that we achieve that are worth something take pain and sacrifice. Uh, and to try to take those lessons from my dad and then teach those lessons to my kids, that the hard things you face, the things that you want to give up on or not even try, might be the best things.
We would have ended on that note. A great lesson, something that we can all remember. But a couple weeks after recording this, Luke gave me a phone call, and I thought that that was a much more poignant way to end the interview and something that would be even more of a blessing to listeners. So, here is that phone call.
About 2 weeks after we recorded this, my younger brother Tim passed away. Throughout my childhood and my experience with my dad, Tim was a big part of those stories. a big part of how that looked. One of the things that stood out to me with my dad and those last few hours of Tim's life was some of what my dad had said. He had expressed a desire to make sure that he did everything he could to give Tim the best last day he could, to do what was right for Tim in all of those decisions that had to be made, and to help him through that last day. It was an example of sacrifice and of just a commitment to love someone well. And I think that's one of the lessons I learned from my dad, and from both my parents. For these purposes, we're talking about dads. That as a believer and as a father, we have a responsibility to love, and to love sacrificially. And that's one thing that I saw in my dad when it comes to my brother.
Thanks for listening. And again, if you'd like to get in touch with our team, you can email me at hroberthansen@gmail.com. We hope to inspire new dads, tell stories about good dads, and highlight positive fatherhood along the way. If you'd like to be informed about future content, subscribe to the show, and we sure would appreciate it if you could leave a positive review.